As the global order shifts, the climate crisis intensifies, and political landscapes evolve, urgent questions arise. What are the greatest challenges ahead, and how should we respond? How can we shape a more resilient, democratic, and sustainable future for our continent? To explore these pressing issues through the lens of green politics, we speak with Mr. Daniel Freund, member of the European Parliament for the Greens and a leading voice on transparency, democracy, and European integration. This is a Forum Europaeum interview with Mr. Daniel Freund.
So, hello everyone, this is Forum Europaeum, and today's guest is Daniel Freund, who is a member of the European Parliament from the German Grünen party, and we would like to thank you for your participation in today's episode. And if it's good for you, then we can begin with the questions. My first question is the following. What are the central issues that truly concern people in Europe today, according to the Greens? And which of these topics do you personally raise in the European Parliament?
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's very nice that I can join this recording. I think there's a number of issues that are very important for Europeans right now. I think the geopolitical situation, that war has come back to the immediate neighborhood of Europe is of concern, and of course the impact that this war has. Things have gotten a bit better, but life has gotten expensive. Food, rent, prices are high. I think that's also on lots of people's minds, the cost of living, and in general, our prosperity, our economy. I think an issue that maybe not every day, but that should be very much on our mind, of course, is also the long-term threat to our peace and security, and that is climate change. So unfortunately, there isn't just one thing that we should take care of, but multiple threats that we see. And maybe because you also asked what I personally work on, I think, Europe is being attacked from the outside, but it's also attacked from within, from those that want to destroy the European Union or our democracy. People like Viktor Orbán or the Alternative for Deutschland in my own country, but there is extreme right, populist, nationalist parties in pretty much every member state of the European Union, and that's something that I particularly work on.
Thank you. Talking about far-right leaders, the most prominent one is Viktor Orbán in Hungary, and you also talk about him on, for example, X many times. And in Hungary, we had a recent new law that was a bill that was introduced, which is described as a Russian-style bill that targets independent media, NGOs, restricting foreign funding and increasing government control. How do you assess the impact of this law on democratic freedoms in Hungary and the broader implications for the rise of the far right in Europe?
So Viktor Orbán has been following, in a way, Putin's playbook for many years. He's in power now for 15 years, and he has very systematically attacked anyone that could, check on him, control him, criticize him. He has pretty much eliminated the independence of the judiciary, has completely stacked the courts with his allies. Him and his cronies have taken over pretty much all media in the country, with the exception of a few blogs, let's say. But television, newspaper, radio stations are pretty much entirely controlled by Orbán. He is trying to stifle the last sort of elements of independent civil society, NGOs, particularly those working on human rights, on anti-corruption. are in his crosshair, and he has tried in the past to take away their funding, to restrict their work, to intimidate them with searches by the police, by the tax office, and whatnot. So I would very much read this as the next attempt now to restrict them even further, basically to silence them so that they can no longer speak up about the corruption of him and his friends and family. And that this can happen right in the heart of the European Union is frightening and also shocking, quite honestly. I've been working with others in the European Parliament for years for us to do something about it. I was one of the negotiators for the so-called rule of law conditionality, the mechanism that now allows us to freeze many billions in funding that are foreseen for Hungarians, that should bring fast internet, school renovations, and all the good things that we want to do with EU funding. But since the money is actually not being used to renovate schools or to modernize hospitals and all these things, but to enrich friends and family of Orbán, to fund their private jets, vacation in the Maldives and whatnot, we have frozen quite a substantial share of the EU funding for Hungary. But I think the EU should be faster and should do even more. I think, for example, that we should strip Orbán of his veto power, so that he can no longer blackmail the rest of the union and actually, quite honestly, threaten all of our security. Because time and again we see, particularly on our line towards Ukraine and against Russia, he is circumventing, blocking, weakening our response, and he should no longer be able to do that.
Thank you. Would you describe Hungary as a democracy, or is it a hybrid regime, or even an authoritarian one? What do you think about this?
I'm not sure it matters too much what I think personally. I think what is important is that the entire European Parliament, the large majority of politicians in the EU, no longer consider Hungary a fully functioning democracy. The exact classification in the parliament that we have given it is an electoral autocracy. But yes, it's not just us, it's anyone really looking at the quality of democracy, anti-corruption, press freedom, respect of civil liberties. On all these fields, you can see that Hungary no longer is a full democracy. It's a shame, because it used to be. It used to be sort of the poster child of reform. When the Soviet Union collapsed, when Hungary became fully independent, democratic, a very liberal country, and actually Viktor Orbán had a role in that, right? And he was a liberal politician. But then, money and power became more important than anything else, and now he's no longer fighting for democracy or even for Hungary. He is just fighting to make his family and friends as rich as possible.
Yes, he was even the vice president of the Liberal International before. Talking about the media itself, in a European context, how do you assess the role of the media and social networks in today's society? Should there be a stronger control over, for example, X or regulations to prevent the spread of fake news and misinformation?
The media landscape has been changing rapidly in the past few years, and as you said, social media in particular are gaining more and more viewership. People less and less consume sort of traditional media, television, radio, newspapers, and get more and more of their information and disinformation online on social networks. That can have advantages, so I'm a big fan of social media, but we need to make sure that the disadvantages, the risks, the threats are controlled. We should not let social media destroy our public discourse, free speech, the protection also of people. That we have agreed on certain rules in all other media, or when we interact personally with each other. That we don't attack each other, that we don't insult each other, that we don't say certain things that might be forbidden for good reason. That, for example, in Germany, certain things, from our past, certain phrases from the Nazi Party have been outlawed after the Holocaust and the Second World War. I think, this is all good, and it needs to apply as well online. That you cannot just threaten someone with murder without that having any consequences. That you cannot incite to violence and hatred online, and also if you spread fake news, disinformation, lies, that needs to have consequences, and we need to better. On some elements we certainly can make better rules, but we have also in the last few years passed some important legislation. The Digital Services Act, the Digital Media Act, that should protect Europeans, when they move online, and now it's about enforcing that. When even big platforms just simply ignore the legislation, then they need to be punished, and the European Commission is in charge of doing that, and we're pressuring from the Parliament that they do their job.
Thank you. Do you think that, for example, a European alternative in the social media landscape, which is created by Europeans and maybe also supported by the European Union, could this be a good solution for maintaining even our sovereignty, or having a non-American and not a Chinese platform that we use every day?
Yeah, I think that would be good. I'm a big fan that we have sort of public broadcasting in every member state of the European Union. That we also spend public money on having good quality public information through radio, through internet, through television, and so on. And I would actually hope that we do that at the European level as well, because it's one thing to have sort of Polish public television or Spanish or Belgian or whatever. But if you speak of the force power, right? You have government, you have the parliament, you have the courts, but you also have a free press that checks on all those that have power, and we don't have a European press. We don't have a European media in a way that holds European power to account. So I would be very much in favor of that. If there were a European platform or social media, I think that could also be good. I don't think that should be created, by politicians or by the European Union. But I think it would be great if there were some smart Europeans creating a startup for a European platform that that don't sell our information to the Chinese government or to the US, and that respects European law and values. That would be great.
Thank you very much. Moving to another topic, I would like to ask you about green politics. So, what is your position as a member of the Greens in the European Parliament on the EU's Green Deal? Do you believe this plan endangers Europe's economic future? And what alternatives do the Greens propose to balance environmental protection with economic stability?
I'm obviously a big fan of the Green Deal, not just because it has the name of my party in its name. We actually, in a way, we had proposals for this, but it doesn't come from us, right? It's Ursula von der Leyen, conservative president of the European Commission, who put this plan forward. But we, as Greens, have supported large elements of this Green Deal, and I generally think that transforming our economy, making it sustainable, ecological, green, is a good thing. And it doesn't harm our economy, quite the opposite. If you look, for example, at the car industry, it's the biggest industry in Germany, creates hundreds of thousands of jobs, and has, contributed quite significantly to the wealth not only of Germany, but of Europe in the past decades. So now, not only for the purpose of protecting the climate, but also just because they're better, electric vehicles are gaining ground, right? And if you look, for example, at the biggest car market in the world, which is China, they have already passed, the mark that now a majority, over 50% of the new cars being sold in China are electric vehicles. So the question, for example, and that is an element of the Green Deal, whether in Europe the car makers switch to battery electric vehicles, it's not only a question of protecting the climate and the environment, it's also a question whether we still happen on the biggest car market in the world, whether we're still competitive, whether our cars still sell, or whether Chinese people just buy, Chinese electric vehicles or maybe a few Teslas, but stop buying European cars. And we used to be the biggest car sellers in China. Volkswagen for over 20 years was the biggest, seller of cars in China, and since 2 years now, we lost that spot, and European car makers are further falling behind. And what we see in the car industry is actually true in pretty much any industry. So if we want to be competitive, if we want to remain rich, if we want to still play a role in the economy of the world of the future, well, then we need to make sure, that on things like renewable energy, heat pumps, electric vehicles, that on these things we happen. So for me, everyone that says, oh, but this Green Deal, this transformation of our economy and our society is somehow costly, I think it's our only chance. And if we miss those opportunities, if we think that the diesel engine is somehow the future, well, then I fear there's a dark future ahead where we make things that nobody wants to buy anymore.
Thank you. Talking about trade policy connected to the electric vehicles, for example, how do the Greens evaluate the EU's trade relations with China, the United States, and other key global players? What do you believe the EU and Germany should do to safeguard their interest in an increasingly multipolar world?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think we have a huge interest that trade stays open and free. Trade has made our continent one of the richest in the world, and it quite honestly also, makes our life pleasant, because there's lots of stuff that either doesn't grow in Europe. Without trade, we would not have coffee, chocolate, bananas, and also lots of things that you don't really find or find less in Europe. Lots of raw materials, resources that we need. And Germany maybe a bit more than other countries, but European countries are trading countries. It's what makes our economy work and function. And for that to remain so, we need a trading environment in the world that is fair and that follows rules, and where it's not just, big countries bullying other countries. What Donald Trump is trying to do, or I don't know, the chaos he produces with his tariffs, that is not benefiting anyone. It's destroying our wealth. It's destroying our trade partnerships. It's a huge risk for us. So we need to make sure that we defend, as Europeans, our interest. Trade is, fortunately, one of the few areas that we say fully integrated, meaning that none of the EU countries actually trades on its own with the rest of the world, but we do that together. Europe, the European Commission, speaks on trade. They do the trade deals, and you can't actually trade with an individual EU country. Trump couldn't do a trade deal with Hungary or Spain or anyone. he needs to do a trade deal with the European Union. And I think that's good, that we speak together with one voice when it comes to trade. We're much stronger together rather than every country for itself. I think what we need to look at more is our dependencies on lots of things. And we have witnessed that with much pain in the last few years. We are dependent on certain other countries in the world. During the pandemic, we realized how much we're dependent on China, on medical equipment, on medicines, on masks, and so on. And that's obviously not good. Then they can force us to do certain things, or during a pandemic, they can withhold things that we need. When Russia invaded Ukraine, I think lots of Europeans, unfortunately too late, but at that moment realized how dependent we were on Russian oil and gas and energy. And when you're very dependent on someone else, it makes you vulnerable. And then when there is a conflict, they can do things to you that you don't want. So I'm very much for trade. I'm very much for openness, but I think we need to be very aware as well on our dependencies and work to make sure that we're not too dependent on any individual country, so that we can remain strong and independent and wealthy as much as possible.
We trade together, but in 2025, a unified European army is also a very interesting topic. And do you think that it's possible, or how would you envision the cooperation between European countries or members of the European Union in the field of military?
Yeah. Well, the European Union is the most successful peace project in the world, right? We fought each other for hundreds of years in Europe. Every few years there was a war, Germany against France, Austria against Italy, whoever. We were always fighting and killing each other. And we have stopped that. We thought maybe a bit too much that war in Europe was a thing of the past, and then Putin unfortunately showed us that it's not, and he brought it back. So I would prefer we could spend all our money on other things, on making our schools better, our hospitals better, invest in a green future. But unfortunately, we also have to protect our way of life, our interests, our lives. So we have to defend ourselves. And I think that defense is more efficient. It's better. We're stronger together. So a European army absolutely makes sense. We're going to deter Putin way more with one strong European army rather than with 27 tiny little forces that have difficulties working together. So I'm a big fan of the idea of a European army. I think it makes war inside Europe even less likely if we have one joint army, and I think it's a better deterrent for anyone from the outside that wants to threaten or harm us. But I also have to admit that in a way it's unfortunately a bit too early to start ordering our aircraft carrier and whatnot, because if you look at how we take decisions for now in the EU, anything concerning foreign policy, anything particularly concerning defense and security, requires unanimity. It means that any one of the 27 heads of government and heads of state can block us. Viktor Orbán, with his veto, can entirely paralyze the European Union. Can, when he says no, we no longer have an opinion even on war crimes committed in Ukraine. So, I'm for an EU army, but we need to get rid of unanimity, and maybe, let's have a common foreign policy. Let's have a common diplomacy first before, we order our aircraft carrier.
Thank you very much. And our last question is about the future of Europe. So, how do you envision the future of Europe in 10 years, for example? What are the most important topics for the continent?
We have just a couple of days ago celebrated 80 years of the end of the Second World War and 75 years since a very smart Frenchman, Robert Schuman, actually proposed this idea of Europe working together. And one of the things that he said is that Europe is not made sort of in one big step, but it's the small steps towards ever closer union, towards ever closer cooperation in Europe. And I very much believe in that. I often wish we would go faster. Sometimes Europe is painfully slow, but I believe that we're stronger together, and that idea that we're stronger together is so strong that ultimately it will prevail. There are people in Europe, and there are lots of them in the European Parliament, that want to destroy the European Union, that think we should all, go back to our countries, wall ourselves in, everyone for themselves. I don't believe in that. I believe ultimately in this ever closer, ever stronger union. We have made, even if it doesn't always seem like it, but we have made quite a lot of progress in the last few years. Following the corona pandemic, for the first time, we took out loans together to invest in our future. We bought, although the EU normally has no say on health policy, we bought vaccines together. Now we're coordinating on defense and security. We're buying weapons together to support Ukraine. All that was unthinkable even a few years ago. So I very much hope that we continue down that path of working closer together. I'm very convinced that when we do these things, when we do work closer together, for example on defense, that we should also closer integrate on the institutions. Make sure that the European Parliament, directly elected members, representatives of the people, have a say on where we go, what we spend the money on, and whether everything is working fine. I'm a convinced Democrat, so it also needs those reforms to make that integration work. I wish we could go faster, but I'm convinced we'll get there in the end.
Thank you very much. This was our interview with Daniel Freund, and thank you once again for your participation.
Thanks. See you next time. Bye.